here and will continue to show up. So I'm Amy Jo Goddard. If you don't know my work, I work with sexuality and sexual empowerment. I've been doing that for over 20 years, almost 25 years now. Leonore has been working with me for the last, how many? 6 years.
Very action-packed years.
Very action-packed 6 years of.
I've been getting my PhD in. I got a PhD.
I think you've earned that. Yeah. How do we do that? So we're really, really excited to be here. We talk about these issues all the time. And of course, we've been watching everything that's been happening this week online with the hashtag #MeToo and then some of the responses to that and how massive this actually is. So it's a big deal that this is happening. And we also know that a lot of times things come to the surface, they float up to the surface, and then they quietly go away as we get distracted by other things, and we move on as business as usual. And then a lot of times, you know, this kind of violence and these kind of patterns get swept under the rug and not addressed. And so we really want to call for a bigger, you know, a bigger shift. And, you know, I know a lot of people want that. And so in the spirit of that, we wanted to talk with people today, share some of the things that we've seen and we've noticed, given that we've been doing this work for a long time, and hear from people as you want to share who are on the call, what you've seen or what feels important to you right now too. So we'll encourage you to use the chat today, be active as you can, or if you're on the Facebook, you know, feel free to like comment on the Facebook and we'll check those comments regularly. So we'd really like this to be more of a dialogue today. So yeah, so a lot of intensity, huh, Leonore?
A lot going on. A lot going on. Yep.
Yeah. You know, and we're seeing it in small communities and we're seeing it in this really big way. You know, Harvey Weinstein is just like the latest big media mogul to come out and as, you know, being this serial abuser of people, really, but especially of women. But, you know, it sounds like everybody knew about his behavior in terms of how poorly he treated people. And so none of this was a surprise to people. And he's just like the latest one. But we also know that these patterns are part of systems. They are part of a lot of different communities. You know, we have seen some things in a community that we've been a part of recently that were really, really hard and resulted in 7 women leaving the community. So, so there's a lot for us to look at, and what our role is in terms of doing our own healing, and then also doing something to really impact the collective. And you know, I was told that there were no gender issues in this community when I raised some of the issues, and you know, that to me is like one of the most ludicrous statements I could imagine, because we live in a very gendered world and there are gender issues everywhere. And I know that many people are calling for a genderless world, and we want it to be a world of no gender. We're not there yet.
We're so not there yet. We're a couple hundred years away from that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to say, actually, in good news, it is good to give good news. And I've been meaning to post about this. California, yay, California. I'm very proud of my home state, our home state, passed a law that now on people's driver's licenses, they can identify themselves as male, female, or non-binary. So to my knowledge, we are the first state to do that. And that's progress. That's really progress. And, you know, that's not a small thing that, you know, a state is acknowledging that not everyone fits in those 2 limited boxes. So, so there are good things. We want to talk about the good things too, and not have it be all dark and awful. So, you know, it does feel ubiquitous. And, you know, I think women who have experienced this, and people who have experienced this of different genders, I do see sexual assault and sexual harassment as very gendered issues. Women are overwhelmingly the victims, and men are overwhelmingly the perpetrators. That does not mean that there are not women who perpetrate. That does not mean that there are not people of different genders that experience this. But it is very gendered, and we have to be able to talk about those gender nuances in order to really address this problem. Mm-hmm. So, I think most women have not been surprised by this. This is not new. This is not news. We know, we've experienced this. This is part of our lived lives. That's why Me Too blew up so fast, so big. Yeah, everyone has a Me Too. Who doesn't have a Me Too? And so for people who are surprised, I think that's part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you surprised? Why do you not know? And there's multiple reasons, right? It's not like it's not totally their fault that they don't know. It's the culture of silence around abuse. It's the culture of people pleasing for women to make sure everybody likes them, being nice to everybody so they don't rock the boat. And, so there's a lot of things. We want to kind of dig into some of that today and talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We were reading this article yesterday about the abuses that Harvey Weinstein's employees knew about in his company and that were like normalized in the mm-hmm. culture of the workplace. And then when the news about the sexual assault allegations came out, it was like, oh, we're shocked. We're shocked, even though this was like in which people he threw things at his employees in meetings right. and called them the C word and everything. So actually we haven't really talked about this yet. So I actually wanted to pose a question to you, Joe. Why do you think people respond to the sexual violation with shock and surprise when he was already a known bully, harasser, and mm-hmm. abuser emotionally and in the workplace?
I think that's a really good question. I would like to dig into that today.
Yeah,
why don't we do a ritual opening, and then let's dig into that. I think that's a good place to start.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just had the new moon. It's a time of a lot of dramatic truth telling, and knowing that we can so easily get caught up in urgency and anxiety about what's going on. We just wanted to do a little ritual opening to actually come back to our bodies and come into the present moment, because it's really important to stay in our center when Absolutely. There's so much going on. So if you're watching, or if you're watching Facebook, hopefully if you're on the phone, you're not driving. If you're driving, don't close your eyes, but otherwise just close your eyes and just take a few breaths. And just feeling your body and how you're seated and connected to the earth, and feeling the connection to all the other women who are in our virtual circle here and those who'll be watching the recording later. Just allowing yourself to come into the present time in this moment of gathering for solidarity. And we're going to do a ritual invocation to the 4 directions. So if you know where the east is, go ahead and turn to the east. We call upon and welcome the spirits of the east and of air, of new beginnings, of dawn, and of the wind, the air that gives us breath to fill our lungs and to speak our truth, to sing out loud, to speak truth to power, to whisper, to shout, and to call one another in. We welcome the spirits of the east that bring the clarity of new beginnings and the winds of change that stir us forth into new freedoms and new expressions of ourselves and our truths. We call upon and welcome the spirits of the east and ask them to bring us new illumination and the light to see what has been kept in the darkness, and the courage to speak our truth and to join one another in the fresh and clear air of a new day. Welcome, spirits of the east.
Spirits of the south, spirits of fire. Spirits of that fire and passion that burns within each one of us, spirits of our sexuality, of that creative energy and that life force that we use to create everything in our lives, that light that shines from us, that emanates from us and creates more light in the world. We ask you to give us the strength of our convictions, the strength and the courage to share those convictions in a way that can create real change in this world. We ask you to imbue us with the action steps that can really create the world that we want to live in, that is safe for all of us. Thank you, spirits of the fire and of the south, for being here.
Mm. Call upon and welcome the spirits of the west, spirits of water, spirits of flow and change that remind us of the power of emotion, of the softness of water and the tremendous raging power of the floods. We call upon the spirits of water that connect us through our tears, through our bloodlines, all the way to the ancestors, and that remind us of the flowing power of intuition, the pull of the moon on us, on our bodies, the pull of our instincts and our inner knowings, and the truth that we surrender to when we open up and follow the power of emotions, validating the truths there and knowing that we're all connected in this great flowing tide that makes us human. Welcome, spirits of the West.
Welcome. Spirits of the North, spirits of the oldest living ancestors of this earth, of the rocks and the shore, the foundation that is underneath each of us and that really supports us in everything in our lives. We thank you for that firm foundation and for holding the stories of our lineages, of our histories, our herstories. We thank you for the whispers as you usher us on our path into the next steps, into what is right and true for our purpose here on this earth at this time. We thank you, all of those who came before us, for forging that path and for making it possible for us to do our healing work today and to step into our power and into the fullness of who we are in a very different way. We are so grateful to you for the way that you have forged that path and held us and continue to hold us, even in times when we feel like things are very disrupted or uncertain or insecure. We know that we are not alone, and we thank you for walking this path with us, spirits of the North.
Mm-hmm. Call upon the spirits of the center to guide us home to ourselves, the center of the flame and the center of every circle, the secret center of every woman here in our virtual circle, the center of each moment. We ask the center to bless us and be with us so that we can be guided to know our true authentic being, our true natures, to speak from the heart and to more fully express what's been hidden, what's been concealed, that it can be known and held, expressed, honored, and restored. Blessed be.
Blessed be. So welcome, everyone. So just to be clear where we come from in terms of the tradition of calling in the directions, both Leonore and I have come from women's communities, and I have also been on a path of the Lakota for over 15 years. And so I honor my teacher, Beverly Little Thunder, and I honor many of the teachers I have had in women's circles and women's spirituality. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, and just that I honor the circles that I come from of women's spirituality and the esoteric traditions that taught me to pray to the four directions, and especially my teachers, Elizabeth Nam and Gina Martin.
All right. So thank you for doing that with us, everyone. So I think I want to, before we get into like some of the nitty gritty of what's happening right now, I want to bring us back to the reminder of the deepest truth that there is, which is the erotic. And there is so much in our world that strives to disconnect us from this core power. And I want to really acknowledge that strongly. We all came from that place. We all came from that creative, erotic impulse that wanted to create new life. We all have that within us. That is a core part of who we are. We cannot divorce ourselves from that. Many people try. Many people do separate themselves, and it causes them much pain when they do that. And many of us have been separated from it through our trauma, through the violations we have had, through the way that our sexuality has been used against us. And your sexuality is yours. It is a core power. And I want to invite you into the awareness that if you have been disenfranchised from it, or disconnected from it in some way, that is really the path home to yourself. And they don't get to own that. They don't get to take that from us. The people that perpetrated whatever they perpetrated. We all have these stories. We all have stories of shame, being shamed around our sexuality or around our bodies or around sex or whatever. And we've had our boundaries violated. You know, we've been told that we don't get to have boundaries. And none of that is true. That's a way that power has been used over women for centuries now in many, many cultures around the world. And it's a place where we are so powerful that that's, of course, the place where they go to try to control us. Because if they can control us there, then they can bring us down. They can have, you know, whatever the other bigger pieces of power are that they're striving for. And so we've seen this in many, many, many ways over time. We see it in our culture today. We see it every time there's a war. Women's bodies are used. And it is a way of diminishing a population. It is a way of exerting control, of colonizing entire people. And that's not their power to claim. So my call to you today is that in some way, if you have felt that disenfranchisement or disconnection, that you reclaim that you name that is part of what is happening, and that does not serve your highest good, and that this power is not the problem. And I think a lot of times we begin to believe that. We begin to think that, like, oh, sexuality is bad, or my desires or my impulses are bad or dirty or whatever. We start to think that because of the way it has been soiled and used, you know, in ways that are not okay, that are demeaning, and that certainly do not hold our highest good. This is a core part of who you are. There is nothing bad about it. What needs to be addressed is the way that people use it, right? The way that people sexualize us. So I think that is what is really coming to the surface. And so I just want to bring that piece in as we begin to talk today. So just to connect with our bodies, I just want to invite you to just do what one of my clients called this the 2-minute tingle. So where you just really start to touch your body, every part of your body, starting at your crown, down your neck, down your face, down your ears. I like to kind of like squeeze my earlobes a little bit. Like really consciously feeling the skin, the muscle, the bones, the fat, the curves, and just like coming down your neck, down the front of your body, rub your breasts. Don't forget your yoni. Come down into your hips, all the way down your legs, all the way down to the bottoms of your feet. Like waking up your skin, I don't know what time zone you're in or what time it is, but you can do this any time of day. I love doing it in the morning because it's such a nice way to wake up the body and connect with the body. get your back, rub around, I like to rub your butt. Feels really good to rub your butt, squeeze your thighs, get around to your back and reach as much of your back as you can. Like just really making that contact. If you can do it skin to skin, that's great, or over clothes is fine too. But just really waking up your body, touching every part of your body, arms, hands, all of it. And I'd love to hear in the chat if there's anything you notice that feels different in your body from doing that. So please do use the chat today. We want to hear from you. I know that there's a couple people on the phone, so if you want to pop us an email, you could do that. More please at amyjogoddard.com if you have comments as we go. So yeah, so I guess some of the questions we can think about, and if you want to say anything in the chat, is why are women rising up right now? Like, what are you seeing that's important about this? And what are you seeing emerge as the needs that we have in order to really create change and in order to really heal? Because we're really in a very big cultural battle right now. And we are warriors. We are survivors. Like that many people wrote Me Too and have lived to tell about it, says something about our resilience. So, we've been in this battle for a long, long time, and many of us have been in a very internal battle about it. And so I hope that if anything, people feel less alone right now. We hear in the conversations that Leonore and I have with people all the time, we hear about these deeply tender hurts and these deeply tender stories. And so we know what people are going through. We know what women are going through. We know how deep this stuff can go. And we also know the things that hold women back from speaking up, that fear of retribution. And going back to your question about Weinstein, maybe part of it is just ignorance about human nature. It's like if someone's gonna call people names, that are quite offensive in staff meetings and throw things at them and treat them like that. To me, it would, of course, do you really think, he's going to be a gentleman on a date?
Yeah. I think there's a way in which we've been so trained to accept toxic behavior and boundary crossing that it's been normalized to the point where people saw what was above the surface and excused it. And along with everything else, I think it is very pervasively normalized in our culture. And then I think because sexuality is so deeply exiled for many of us, because we have all these burdens and that we don't want to talk about, and we don't get the tools or the education to know how to do that. And we just grow up in a culture of silence about sexuality in general, where if you ever had someone talk to you honestly and respectfully about the sexual aspects of being human, you were probably in the minority. It's just such a low baseline to begin with that I think it just created an environment where these huge violations could happen and no one would take ownership for really looking into it.
Yeah. And he was someone that just had so much power.
That's the other thing.
When you look at how much he is, at least given credit for, how much of that is true, who knows? It requires a lot of people to make a film, but he certainly made an indelible mark. So, so I think that's hard too, and those threats sounded like they were very real. He really did hurt people's careers. He's denying all of the allegations, but really, like right after you assaulted this woman who then didn't want to do what you wanted her to do the next day, suddenly there's all the stuff in the tabloids that like completely disrupted her career. Like, hard for me to believe he had nothing to do with that.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
right. It's just a big coincidence. Suddenly she's in the news.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think when we speak up, you know, it's this idea like, oh, we're going to be bitches or sluts.
We asked for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with how we were performing our womanhood. You know, it's like I think the ways that women are demeaned are so to the core. Like it's different from, I think, the way that men are put down when they do something wrong or disrupt something. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's really similar, but in terms of just, it's like our performance of our gender, you know, really is on the line a lot of times. And so then they'll use these gendered ways of putting us down. The bitches, the sluts, those are very gendered terms. You don't ever hear, you know, unless it's like playful among gay men, you really don't hear those words be, you know, used towards men. Not in a demeaning way. If a man's a slut, that's usually appealing, right? So there's all these ways that we can get discredited, you know, and that does have really long-standing effects. You know, look at Monica Lewinsky. Look at what happened with her. Mm-hmm. You know,
she's still the cultural scapegoat.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's unbelievable. She was what, 23, 24 years old when that happened. It's like she fell in love with the president. The president crossed a line.
Yeah.
And you know, and has he not been able to do the things he's here to do in the world? No. You know, what did she end up with? Suicidal, you know, like she was on the brink of suicide for a long time. She has been like bullied unbelievably, you know, to the point where like now that's her work. She's really working to end online bullying and address this problem, you know, but it's like, it's crazy how this impacted her.
Right. Then this gigantic example of the cost that the woman is made to bear in these cases.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, and then even thinking about someone like Sandra Bland, right? Sandra Bland was pulled over by cops and questioned them because it was such a bullshit situation. And she lost her life over it for using her voice. I mean, you know, it's made very clear to us how dangerous it is. And so the only option is solidarity, because this isn't about a lone wolf or one person out there like doing, you know, being the voice. You know, they will be the scapegoat. Monica Lewinsky was the scapegoat. I have been the scapegoat for being the one that would speak up. Like the one that speaks will be that. And so there has to be solidarity, and women have to support each other, and men have to support women. And, you know, all of us need to be looking at these dynamics and willing to name them and, you know, and create real change. And that's the work. That's the work. You know, the work is internal, and then that's the external work. So
I've been really thinking about this dynamic of when we don't, especially among women, of when we don't listen to one another, when someone brings forth a vulnerable truth about a difficult experience like this, especially sexually, when we don't validate one another's experiences because it feels safer to stay on like the side of minimizing it or denying it so we don't have to admit how big the problem is. And so often it becomes, it triggers like a shame in us about something we've gone through that we don't know how to handle, or we just actually lack the ability to accept that someone else's reality is really different from what we've experienced, and especially when the perpetrator is someone that we also know. And I think that there's just a core piece about being able to really hear and validate one another's experiences that is like a core skill that we all have to develop around this. And I really want to bring forward the piece too, that like one thing that I really see disrupting female solidarity and feminist solidarity is the inability to do that, the inability to acknowledge and validate one another's experiences, that we share common threads around the ubiquity of sexual assault and violation, but we're really impacted differently based on who we are in the world, especially by race. and the inability of white women and white feminism to really like understand and validate what women of color have gone through and the burdens that they bear around this is one way in which our feminist solidarity is really challenged. So I just really want to like name and honor that Me Too existed long before Alyssa Milano. It comes from Tarana Burke, who's doing the work since 2006 and starting this as a movement specifically for young women of color and the burdens that they bear around sexual assault. And that so often what happens in white feminist organizing is that these things lose their roots, and the originators get sort of disappeared when these go viral. So I just really want to like bring it back to the source here and the resilience that women of color have been fostering in around this in particular, that is often difficult for women with white privilege to understand.
For sure. Yeah, I think we have to look at those multiple lenses in terms of, the burdens that we carry. It's like a woman in the workplace who's also facing racism in the workplace is going to have a whole different set of things of concerns and of potential retribution if she speaks up. So I think like building solidarity across racial lines and across racial issues that really are everybody's issue, that get kind of like put into this box as like, that's that community's, thing, or, that's happening because they're doing that over there. That doesn't affect me, is one of the most disempowering things that we continue to do that prevents us from actually having that real solidarity. And we don't have to understand it all. We may never understand it all because we are having a different experience. And we can still stand in solidarity with one another and lift women of color up and lift up people with disabilities and people whose voices do not get lifted up enough. So all of us have the ability to do that and need to use our privilege and our power for that kind of good, we need to like level that playing field in the ways that each of us know how, so that power doesn't get concentrated in a Harvey Weinstein who gets to just abuse everybody. That's part of the problem when that much power is concentrated in one place. That has been the problem on the world stage, with so much power being located, in the US and the US political system. It's a problem, and the world is kicking back. Like people are tired of it, So, microcosms, macrocosms, like we can see these dynamics everywhere. So it does start with like, looking at where these things live inside of us and how we want to move as an actor in all of this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Leonore?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm really seeing in Me Too is a social movement that is shifting the locus of shame and responsibility from, it was my fault, like the burden that's so often put on victims and survivors of sexual assault, to this was done to me and that's wrong. And this movement has allowed people to come forward and just to normalize and to release some of the shame and responsibility that falls on us. Because in patriarchy, we're put in this double bind as women. We're put in this place of being socialized to be the gatekeepers around sexuality. We're taught from a very young age to be mindful of not leading men on, not leading men and boys on, not being a tease, being careful with how we present ourselves. And then the responsibility also falls on us to speak up when and not if something goes wrong. And often we're punished for it and told that we deserved it in some way. So how do we get out of this double bind? Well, I think it really comes to doing the internal work on ourselves, the self-empowerment and the sexual empowerment work that lets us move beyond that. And the truth is, it's not women's responsibility to teach men like how to be human beings and respect other humans. it's not our responsibility to do that. Men need to stop doing that, but they won't arrive at that conclusion on their own. Like, that's actually how privilege works. And if hashtags could have solved this problem, you know, it would have been solved by now, right? So it's actually going to take women not standing for this and not allowing this to be perpetrated at all anymore. And again, this isn't about being against men. This is about being against the violence and the gendered way that that plays out in patriarchy, which includes the unique burden that is put on men when they are victimized and they don't have resources, and they bear the extra burden and the extra layer of shame, because there's no place in this narrative for men to also be victimized. They are only the perpetrator or like the good guy. And there's no space for sexual empowerment in either of those, right?
So and we have that too, right? So we get like the you know, you're either the whore or you're the Madonna, the virgin, right? You know, you're the good girl, right? That's our version of that. So and guys are like, I don't want to be that guy, you know, but then they try to be the good guy, and then that doesn't work either. You know, I think we're all like in this like horrible gender bind. I mean, yes, it would be awesome to have a world without gender and without all this bullshit around gender, but this is what is in front of us and what we actually need to deal with right now. And, you know, and a move like California actually acknowledging that there are people of other genders is like a huge progressive step forward, you know?
Totally. Yeah. So this is about all of us, you know, all of us doing this work and doing the work in our communities. And when we do that and we can become part of larger movements for peace, kindness, well-being, safety, and autonomy of the body, mind, and spirit, and we learn the actual tools for standing for ourselves and with each other, then we can change this, you know. And this goes so far beyond Harvey Weinstein and the entertainment industry. I think that's just coming out because there's so much privilege and cultural cachet associated with celebrity, but it's in every single industry. It's in every industry, and it's in our families, and it's in our spiritual communities, and in our social initiatives where we try to transcend gender issues and gender dynamics. It plays out there in the shadow too, and it's in every workplace. Like, it is everywhere. So at least at the very edge now, we are just really seeing the problem. I think we really have to see and understand the problem more before we can move into solutions. Yeah.
The problem's massive, but not, you know, like I wouldn't have stuck with this work for 25 years if I didn't believe we could do better. So we all have to believe that. We all have to, you know, it's like giving up is not an option. Giving up is not an option. You know, it's painful in so many ways that we're still here, you know, like this is what brought me into my work to begin with. When I was like a young, like college student in my early 20s, you know, I came into this work because I had experienced my own assaults and didn't want other people to experience that. I wanted to help empower women and girls, you know, and it's like, you know, and I just keep watching the same conversations. You know, I'm one of those older generation people now that's like, yep, we talked about that in the 90s, you know, we did that. It's like these things just cycle back, and let's move the pendulum forward. Let's like take a big step forward. I mean, I think there is a real ripe moment here for that.
Totally. Yeah. So I want to check in with people watching on the webinar and on Facebook and just ask, what is the place in you, in your own self-empowerment work that really feels like an edge right now and that you've been holding back on? Like, what is coming up for you in watching the huge like groundswell of Me Too and everything that's being released right now? What are you seeing as like a place where you need to grow? There's a great comment from Ramona that I want to share. And she says, what is needed are tools not only to heal ourselves and lean into other women, but especially models to have those tough conversations with men who are potential allies, but complicit in their silence. I've been practicing calling out those who consider themselves to be good men. And damn, it is tough to get through their thick skins of emotional denial. So true.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question, you know, is how we have these conversations. And, you know, there's been this response. What's the hashtag that men have been using? Yes, I did. Or
it was me.
It was me. It was me, right? And so this has come out in response to the Me Too, to say, yeah, here's some of the things that I've done. Here's how I've been complicit. Here's how I've participated in whatever behavior towards women that was, you know, not okay. And so it is a place where, you know, I think like that is a move forward, that men are actually acknowledging that and not just on the defense of like, but I'm the good guy,
Right.
you know, and I didn't do it. I mean, it's like, we're all part of this system. We're all part of these dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if that many women are saying me too, well, gee, who perpetrated
Who's on
all
the
of
other
that?
side of that? Yeah.
You know, like, so I think that is a good step. And yeah, and I think there is this like this deeper step of what does it mean to really listen and understand that impact, and to change, you know, and to move out of the defensiveness and really into, you know, I've had men be super defensive with me this week online. And I was just like, okay, if this is how we're going to have the conversation, that's just not productive. So yeah, you know, it might mean that you have to hear some hard truths. It might mean like acknowledging parts of your history, or parts of some of the men that you respect or hang out with that aren't okay, you know? And men have to learn also, I think, how to call each other out.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Because that's what shifts, you know, that's what helps it be our responsibility as women to constantly be educating men and showing men their blind spots. Like, we really need more men who are doing this work on themselves and doing the hard emotional labor so that we don't have to keep doing it. We're tired. we need a break.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's how people of color feel, you know, and dealing with race. It's like, we're freaking tired of having to like help white people understand why this is a problem. I saw, God, which athlete was it, had a shirt that said, you know, we stand up, you know, you get upset. We sit down, you get upset. We take a knee, you get upset.
Right.
We speak out, you get upset. We get killed, you do nothing.
Right.
You know, and it really, it's true. It's so sad and so painful how true that is. You know, it just makes me so sad. But, you know, yeah, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to shift in our own communities, you know? And so just as men need to be working with other men and calling them in and helping them understand when they're on the defense, white folks need to be working with other white folks around this, you know, so that all of that emotional labor and all of that work and pressure isn't on people of color that are in the room or in the community or whatever. Like, they've done enough of that. You know, they've done all that on top of dealing with all of the racism that is constantly happening, you know? So there's a lot of parallels I hope people can see here, because it's really important that we look at all of these pieces. You know, when women are in this place of, or anybody is in a place of healing from trauma, it's going to be really hard to educate, take time, take steps to get people to understand and get them on board with like why they need to change or why a situation needs to be different. That's a lot of work. It's a lot. That's very hard to do, you know? And, you know, I mean, I think that this is a major, major reason why we aren't further in our culture, you know, why there's still only like 20% representation in our legislatures. Why, you know, women are still only, you know, like 5% of the CEOs at Fortune 500 companies, you know? It's like on top of like being moms, raising the children, doing all the like emotional labor around these things, like we're dealing with trauma. We're trying to heal. We're trying to just like get through, you know? I mean, I've had conversations this week with people that it's like, you know, I've been really successful in my career, but like I'm hiding, you know, and nobody really knows what's really going on because I've got this trauma that hasn't been dealt with. Like, that's what we're talking about here, you know? And if companies don't want to start addressing this as the bigger issue that it is, you know, it's like, we can't keep putting the Band-Aid. Like, we keep putting these Band-Aids on, like, okay, we'll have like another sexual harassment training. Like, that's going to fix it, you know? it might bring a few people along a little bit. I'm not downing training. I think training is really important, but it's a bigger picture. It's a bigger conversation about sexuality and gender dynamics and power and how all of those things interface, and how sexualization is a way that people use power over others. So we've got to have a more real conversation about this, and we've got to be willing to do that in workplaces and in our communities.
Totally. Sarah has a couple comments on Facebook that I want to read because I think this ties in really well. She says there's 3 things. One is viewing this as a massive public health issue and framing it as such in K-12 school education, which I love. Can you imagine if we had the federal resources dedicated to this as being the public health issue that it is? I know you worked with in K-12 for a really long time, right, AJ?
Yeah. Oh, I worked in schools for many years. Yeah.
And a lot of times people are like, oh my God, kindergarten? Inappropriate.
Yeah. I mean, people didn't understand, this is part of what comprehensive sexuality education is. You have to include how to take care of ourselves in sexuality education. That's any kind of comprehensive. And, and so, I worked for a Planned Parenthood in New York City for years. We went into schools doing comprehensive sexuality education, and people would be like, what? You're working with kindergartners? What? And it's like, we're not teaching algebra to them, like, it's just like math. Like, you're going to teach the things that will help them at their developmental stages. But this is about, dealing with that whole picture of sexuality throughout our lifespan. And I think looking at trauma as a public health crisis, it totally is. So thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. Totally. And I think it needs to be worked into comprehensive sex ed. It needs to be worked into other things too. I think there's a lot of ways that we could be addressing that.
Absolutely. Totally. So the second thing she says is not only knowing what is wrong and what we're against, but actually what we are for. Celebrating and advocating for healthy, radiant, enthusiastic sexual and sensual experience as a form of connection and play. Yes.
Yes to that.
Yes. Yeah. So often we don't even really know what we're going towards. Like, we know this is wrong, but we don't really know what it actually feels like to have that, because we have been deprived of the tools that would help us have that. And so I think that's the core way in which the sexual empowerment work is essential for us, so we actually know that and can then model that and have that ripple out in our lives, which encourages other people and gives them permission to do this too. So 100%.
Yep. That's why we started the call with that piece on the erotic. It's like, we have to stop denigrating the erotic and start seeing that as such an intrinsic power and an intrinsic and important part of who we are, that it doesn't get to take a back seat, that it's not the thing like, oh, I'll deal with that next year, like, no, it's now. And that is the thing that gives you the energy and the fortification to address this other stuff. Like, if we don't have that, then we're just like completely depleted. And I think that's what's happening for a lot of people. They're so depleted. They're in, that sometimes we go to very dark places because we're not connected to that life force and that light and the play. Yes. The play.
Totally. Play. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. I heard that somewhere once.
Right. The third thing that she says is unwinding the places within my own being that feel shame or even terror about the ways I've bought into the lies or have unconsciously adopted the stances of perpetrators in how I exploit myself and have allowed myself to be exploited as a means of feeling control of my experiences.
Ooh, read that again. Read that again.
That's good.
There's a lot going on there.
Okay, so she's saying unwinding the places in my being where I feel shame and terror about how I've bought into the lies or have adopted the stances of perpetrators in how I exploit myself and have allowed myself to be exploited as a means of feeling control of my experiences.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, I'm curious what other people think. Please pop some comments into the chat. We want to hear from you. Do you know those places in yourself where you've, as she said, taken the stance of the perpetrator? We all have that in us, first of all. So if we're going to really be real about healing, we have to, you know, acknowledge that inside of all of us is a victim and is a perpetrator. And there are different ways that we use those parts of ourselves. And sometimes we use them we're very unaware of how we're using them. And I think it takes a high level of awareness to even be able to make a comment like she just made, you know, but to follow that, to track that, to be able to see that, oh, this is actually a function of my disempowerment, because I'm taking on the stance of the perpetrator as a way to try to empower myself. But as Audre Lorde said, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. I come back to that quote over and over again, and it just gets deeper every time, right? Like, you can't use their tools to change it, to heal it, to move to a new place. It requires a different set of tools. And so yeah, becoming aware of like, where are we using their tools, where that needs to stop, and what do we replace it with? Whew, so much. These are great comments. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Is that Sarah Bell?
Sarah Voss.
Sarah Voss. Thank you, Sarah Voss.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Awesome. So what do we need? Like, what do we actually need for our healing? We've been talking about this, just looking at the work that we do around, you know, for women and couples mostly, although we can work with people of all genders. And one thing that I really want to affirm is that, you know, sometimes, especially in the flood of Me Too that is filling up social media with these stories that can feel so overwhelming, healing actually is possible. Amy Jo and I have witnessed and supported some very deep and profound unburdenings and shifts in people. And I know sometimes like we really avoid these things for so long because it just feels like it can't change because it was a long time ago, or it was so big and we didn't get the support. But I really want to affirm human resilience and the human capacity for healing. I've seen people make huge shifts in not very much time when they had the support and tools and education that they just didn't have before. So I just want to really speak that too, you know, and because I know so often what gets in the way is that we don't believe that it actually can change, and we don't believe it can happen fast. But I've seen what happens when we really have the space to do our own work on violation. And when we can actually release that pain and trauma, and we get to be witnessed in ways that allow for release and allow for compassion to come in and for care to come in and for us to look at the story and for the story to change. That's when healing happens. That's when it's not just replicating the trauma, but when we are able to actually look at and change the story and forgive ourselves and receive the compassion and support that we didn't have before, that's when that huge quantum leap can happen. And I really affirm that that's possible. So I think that that's one essential thing that we need for our individual and collective healing. And, you know, that's what Amy Jo and I are really committed to creating, the spaces that we're committed to creating.
Yeah. And I mean, every client that's ever come to us has had issues around this issue of people pleasing. And that's because we are socialized to do that. We are socialized to play nice. Women are socialized to take care of everybody else, take care of the children, take care of the family, get them their food, whatever that looked like in your family. We are socialized to do that, to not rock the boat, to not be too loud or too opinionated, because when we are bitches and sluts, and we are dismissed. We get dismissed. So there's a lot of reasons why we engage in that people pleasing, and it's a core part of the problem. Because as long as we are engaged in I just want to play nice with everybody, I want to be the good girl, I want to take care of everybody, then the things that need to be said aren't said, the things that need to be challenged aren't challenged. You know, and this stuff then can flourish in environments. So, you know, this is a process that we work with people on consistently, because, you know, just the very basic thing of being able to know where your yes and your no is, and being able to own your yes and your no, which sounds basic. I said it's basic, but it's really complicated for a lot of people. That gets totally obscured through the people pleasing, or through the and also through this culture where we're following the sexuality of men, because the structures and how sexuality is talked about is very focused on male sexuality. And so I think it's very, very hard for people outside of that, for women in particular, to figure out what they want and what their yeses are, because we're caught in this quagmire of not really having a representation of our own sexuality, not knowing what we can want, not even knowing what's on the menu, and then feeling bad that we don't know what we want, and then thinking it's some kind of personal failing when we haven't been given the tools, And so this stuff just cycles and cycles and cycles, So, I mean, that's part of what I love in the spaces that we create, is that we give this opportunity for people to see what that could be and what that could look like, where we just don't have that in our culture, hardly at all, hardly anywhere. And, and that takes time. It takes time to unwind those patterns and to become aware of them, and how deep sometimes they can go. How much what people are wanting from you, or, yesterday someone asked, how do I talk to my date about sex and how to set boundaries or to say what I want, And it's I think the earlier you start that conversation, the easier it is, because then you set this tone of we're going to talk about sex here, we're not going to make assumptions, I want you to ask me, everything is a choice, and I think so often we haven't been given choices, that it's foreign.
We just don't even know we can do that.
Yeah.
We just literally don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Because so many assumptions get made. So less assumptions, really making active choices about everything. Do I want to go to dinner at this restaurant with this friend? No. Actually, when I check in with myself, I really don't feel like that right now. I'm just doing it because they want to do it. It can start with little things like that in our lives that add up to a big pattern of not doing the things we want to be doing.
I read this great editorial by, or this great piece by Lupita Nyong'o, the actress, yesterday, about her harassment by Harvey Weinstein. It's really great. And one thing that I really noticed is that she tells the story of their interaction, so that the seeds of his horribleness that were there from the beginning, and she describes had lunch with him in a restaurant. They sat down and he ordered a drink. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and he ordered a alcoholic drink, and she said, "I want a juice," and he said, "No, you're not having that," and he told the waiter, "Bring her this." And she said, "Actually, no, I don't want that. I want a juice." And they went back and forth, and he told the waiter, "Well, I'm paying the bill, so bring her what I tell you to bring her." And the waiter did.
Wow.
So he brought her this alcoholic drink and put it down, and she didn't drink it. And he said, he criticized her and said, "I want you to drink this." And she said, "No, I'm not going to." And they went back and forth until he said something like, "Wow, you're really bossy," or something like that. And she just laughed and she said, "Yeah, I am."
Oh my
and
gosh.
How amazing that, that's super fucked up. Also, I just love that she was able to just be like, "Yeah, I am." She didn't get sucked into that story of the people pleasing. And there's her whole piece is amazing, and everyone should read it to just see the threads of what she's talking about. But it's so true. So often we leave ourselves and end up in these really hard situations because we just don't know how to set that kind of boundary. So this is a core piece of what we work with people around, and it's amazing how much a little bit of education can massively change your life. Okay, so the other thing that I really want to present as being necessary for the healing, we've already kind of talked about, is just reconnecting with the joy and light of the erotic and the play and the fun. And when you own your pleasure, seeing that as a form of activism. Because this healing is not only about looking at the dark things, but it's about reclaiming pleasure and reclaiming the fun and the joy of the erotic and our sexuality, and knowing what we stand for.
Yeah. And I think, another big piece that we've been doing for a long time, that you cannot do empowerment work as women without doing this piece, is really looking at the dynamics between women that keep us in competition, that keep us suspicious of each other, and that prevent us from really having the solidarity that we need. And again, it doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything to be in solidarity. So that's important. But if we are going to have real meaningful support and relationships with other women, which I hope we want that, then we have to dismantle the ways that we have been socialized to compete with each other and to compare ourselves to each other. Because that, sometimes we're just keeping ourselves down all by ourselves, I mean, seemingly all by ourselves, right? We're socialized. There's a bigger picture here. But it's like, men don't even have to be in there. Like, they're like, great, they're competing, they're doing that thing. And so now we can like do all our whatever fucked up things we want to do with our power over here. I mean, they want that, right? That works. That works to keep patriarchy in place. That works to keep power structures in place. So we've got to look at that. Like, you can't really fully be empowered if you are busy competing with other women. Mm-hmm. And that's just a real truth that we all have to look at. And we've all been taught to do that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Why else is like, oh, I'm not like other girls, why, what that is like this internalization that I need to cut myself off and compete with other women in order to gain the approval and acceptance of men that I want.
And I don't really hang out with women. I just hang out with men.
Women are drama.
I'm like one of the guys. Yeah. Women are too much drama. I mean, anytime I hear women say stuff like that, I'm like, yep, what's going on there?
There's that wound. Yeah, there's that wound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to look at that honestly and be willing to, dig a little deeper underneath that and what that actually has meant for us, that we've disconnected ourselves from each other. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes we've really harmed each other in the way that we have upheld gender roles, in the way that we've told each other how to be as women, or not believed when an assault or, a violation came out, and, how we have participated in sweeping it under the rug. I mean, we do that for each other a lot. Mm-hmm.
Totally. So that's the adopting the stance of the perpetrator.
Right. Exactly. The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house.
Exactly. And what happens when we do this work in order to have real networks of support and real community is that that's what allows us to go into the collective. And for us to actually have the cultural resources that we need to change this. Because, there will be pushback. And one thing that has allowed Harvey Weinstein's and their ilk to command the kind of power that they had was this top-down structure where they had so much leverage because they were responsible had the ability to affect people's careers and ruin people's lives. Mm-hmm. And that's what kept so many people in silence. So the more we actually build networks of community and support where we believe each other, we affirm each other, we have mechanisms of accountability and being able to have conversations when power is being misused, instead of being shocked that it is being misused and then sweeping it under the rug. When we actually change the structures, then we have alternate places to go, so that we don't have to depend on Harvey Weinstein. We don't have to depend on the abusive CEO in order to move forward in our career. Otherwise, we're going to get punished and lose what we worked for. So it's really about doing the work to foster these communities so that we have other ways of being. That's how the culture gets changed.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, we have to break through the patterns of silence, the things that have kept us silent, make more connection, be able to really embrace the power and beauty of our sexuality, of what it means to be women, of what it means to be, human beings, mm-hmm. Human with each other. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to listen. We have to be able to hear without being on the defense. I think that's really big emotional work that people need to do. Totally. Pretty much across the board. Most people have some measure of defensiveness. Some more than others. And it's really a mark of maturity when we can break through the defensiveness and really be able to listen and hold space and really take in with compassion another human being's experience, even if it's not been our experience, and not go into blaming them or shaming them or telling them they must have done something wrong or to cause it or whatever. Like all those tools of oppression that have been used against us, and then we also use sometimes over one another.
Mm-hmm.
So we stand with women who face different oppressors, you know, they don't all look the same. We have to join together to end all oppression and to connect these movements. This is all connected. Me Too is intrinsically connected to Black Lives Matter. Like, these are not separate things. You know, what's happening in the NFL is connected to this. So, you know, there's all these places where it's bubbling up right now. It's a very, very interesting time where we have an opportunity to stand together and really face these oppressors and these oppressive structures and systems that we have all been existing in. At the end of the day, this is so systemic. You know, if the sheer magnitude of the Me Too movement doesn't show us one thing, it shows us that that this is huge. This is way beyond an individual. This is a system. And so we have to begin to look at the pieces of the system that are not working and figure out how to shift it. You know, it starts with ourselves. It starts with being in our own agency, having that bodily autonomy, being able to own our yeses and our nos, getting beyond that people pleasing, really working on what does it mean to be at full choice, having our own financial freedom. Like, we cannot accept less than that. Like, it has to start there. And then with that power, with that personal power, we've got to use that to impact the collective and the systems. And if we don't do this, we will just continue to live in this cycle of perpetration and violence against people with less power and less resources and less access. And it's just so harmful to everyone. Everyone is harmed by this. The little boy who is raised by a mother who is dealing with her trauma from sexual abuse or sexual assault is impacted by this, whether he ever abuses someone that way or not, right? He grew up in that. So, you know, I think also we have to start to see that bigger picture of how maybe you're some anomaly where, like, it didn't happen to your mother or your sister or your daughter or, you know, your girlfriend or anybody that's close to you. Highly, highly unlikely. It still affects you. Like, it still directly affects you. This affects all of us. And so we have to get beyond this isolation, you know, and I think that's one of the good things that's happening is that people are coming out, people are speaking about it who've never spoke about it before. Connections are being built, you know, and so this is really about, like, what does it mean to live in our real, true power?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, a couple of comments from Facebook. Tjia says she's loving this conversation. Hi, Tjia.
Hey, Tjia.
Hey,
I saw Tjia last night.
Oh, nice. Sarah Voss says, thanks so much for your powerful responses. The work continues. # healing is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Lorraine says that her edge is sustaining hope and not giving up. She says, I totter on the edge of fear and despair. You are right. Solidarity and community makes the difference. And I thank you for this. The isolation is tough, finding the space and energy for carrying on day by day in each moment. And yes to hearing hard truths and speaking them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah. What else? If you haven't spoken up on the chat yet, we'd love to hear from you. Like, what's your edge here? Like, what's the next piece you know you need to do? What's the thing that's resonating most for you from this conversation? We'd really love to hear from you if you haven't jumped in yet on the conversation. There's some people both on the Zoom and I'm sure on the Facebook too. So look, this is what we do. This is what we've been doing for a long time. I mean, so in some ways, when this all came out, we were like, finally, like, yes, let's do this. Most people don't even know that this work is there to be done. I had a conversation with someone about that today, about doing some work. We have conversations with people if they come to a place where they know they want to work on the things we're talking about, if they want to really develop their sexuality, if they want to step into their power, we just have a conversation to see, and and I talked to this woman who's in her 60s, and she's just like, I've got to do this. I've got to heal this, who's been carrying trauma for a really long time. So sometimes it takes that long. We love when women show up in their 20s who don't take that long, it's like, but I think that most of us figure it out usually when we're in like our 30s or our 40s or even our 50s or older, because it can take that long to figure out that there's even work here to be done. And so my hope is that what's happening will accelerate this for people and really help people to acknowledge and see that there is another way and there is a way through this, and there are tools and skills that can be learned and developed so that we can show up differently. And one thing I said yesterday that I'll say right now is like, part of it is also like, you've just got to stop caring so much about everybody liking you and giving so many fucks about that. Like, excuse my language, but whatever. I just like to do that on Facebook just because. I won't say that I'm someone that doesn't care at all what other people think about me, but I don't care that much. I care about certain people, but like, really, like, I will speak my mind. I will speak truth. I will speak truth to power. How I learned to do that, it's a long story, but and it's been a lot of influences in my life that have allowed me to, help me develop that strength to be able to do that. We can all do that in our own ways. We're not all going to do it in the same way. Not everyone's going to be a shit disturber in the way that I might choose to be in some ways. But, it really does require that we care less about how much everybody likes us, and that we are focused on like, what is the end game here? Like what is important to me, my own growth, the relationships that are important to me, speaking truth to power, like making a better world, or a better community, whatever it is that you're in. We've got to have that kind of boldness and audaciousness and courage. And it's okay if you're not there yet. So then do the work, do the internal work. So that there's, like, it takes courage just to do the work on the trauma and the healing. That takes a tremendous amount of courage. Like, my heart just like opened this woman that I spoke to, because I knew how much courage it took for her to reach out to me. So please reach out to us, have a call. If things we're talking about are moving, or you are really ready to move the pendulum, like, this is the work, and it's not just about how we're having sex, and I think a lot of the people we work with, the women who show up in our work, are like surprised by that. Sometimes they're like, oh, I thought I was going to be dealing with sex, but we're dealing with all these other things. And it's like, well, sex exists in a context, right? It doesn't exist in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. So it is about that big picture. It's about how we're showing up in our full power. And that has to include your sexuality. You can't sweep your sexuality to the side and then just be like, and I'm fully powerful, and we're just going to ignore that over there. Plenty of women in power positions have tried to do that. Mm-hmm. And maybe they have been successful outwardly, but internally they know there's a deep vacuum there that hasn't been addressed. There's a problem if we are, as Leonore said, exiling ourselves from our sexuality. We have to include that in our healing and in the way we show up in our power.
Preach, Amy Jo. Totally.
I mean, you give me a soapbox.
It's good.
No, I hope it's helpful. I'm wearing my sexual evolution
So
now shirt today.
Yes, there we go.
Wore this in honor of this conversation.
Did you wear it to yoga?
I didn't, because it would be soaking wet. So yes, but I should probably wear that to yoga sometime. Yeah, got to educate the people. Our activism comes in different forms.
Exactly.
When I lived in New York City, it used to just be like reading like some book, like, The Fine Art of Vaginal Fisting, on the subway. And then, that was my activism for the day. People, or like reading, I remember reading Susie Bright on the subway, and then like the young boys would be like looking over and like trying to read the book with me. We do what we can. We all do what we can.
Yeah. Totally. Well, so good. Renee on Facebook says, thank you for creating this space. Renata. And yes to being inspired by other women and not jealous of other women.
Hell yes.
Hell yes.
Renee is one of my oldest, dearest friends. So thanks, Renee. Right back at you.
Totally. And Miranda Katz says, what's the line between safety and speaking up?
What's the line between safety and speaking up? I guess it depends. What do you mean by safety? I mean, because the truth is, the world's not that safe. We're asking ourselves to take risks. Being emotionally connected requires risk. Stepping into our power requires risk. Speaking truth to power requires risk. You know what I mean? So it's like, what do we mean by safety? Do we mean our physical safety and well-being? Do we mean our emotional safety? And then what does that look like? Because I don't know that human relationships are actually emotionally safe per se. I think that they could be a lot of things. I don't know if safe is quite the right word. So I'd love to hear more what you think about that, Miranda. If she's still there, you can comment. So yeah, we all, I guess in the bigger picture, we all have to choose what's right for us. Where are we going to draw the line? How far are we going to go? How much are we going to speak up? Sometimes in service of self-preservation, we pull back, or we're like, I can't be a part of that battle. That's okay. You don't have to fight every battle. You can't fight every battle. So that's why that solidarity is important, and that we surround ourselves by other people who are in this with us and who get it and want to get it, and not just women, like all people who want to get this, and that people can take up the slack where we're like, I can't do it. This one I can't do, We all get to have our limits. We need to have limits. That's healthy to have limits. So if that's the question, yes, we all have to decide what that line is for us. Thanks for that. All right. Anything else in the chats?
Looking pretty quiet.
All right.
Yep.
We're going to close out. Thanks, everyone. It's been, hopefully, it's been a helpful conversation to you. Thank you for showing up. I think we all have a lot of work to do. And it's exciting. It's inspiring that we are in this cultural moment where something really different could emerge. But things are going to get shooken up for that to happen. So put on your seatbelt. Maybe that's the safety.
Yeah, put on your seatbelt.
Yeah.
Totally. So we have some time in our calendars open to just talk with people who are feeling really activated around this and know that they want to do some deeper work on themselves to overcome that people pleasing and do the healing that's there for them and work on their own sexual empowerment. And Amy Jo's going on vacation next week, but I'll be around and would be happy to talk to you. So if you would like to just connect with us, I'd be happy to hear where you're at and talk about some possibilities of working together or recommend other resources that might help you get to where you want to go. Totally no pressure. So you can connect with us at amyjogoddard.com/questions.
Awesome.
And thank you for being here today.
Bernie says, thank you so much for this webinar. People pleasing and caring less about rocking the boat is so key for me. I've taken steps towards this at work against a very inappropriate CEO. Congratulations, Bernie. I'm working on cultivating my voice more, and this work is really helping me. Thank you both. You're so welcome.
You're so welcome.
Bernie is taking a program with us right now. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that, and I want to hear more about this CEO.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's hard to do. I know that that's hard to do. So good for you.
Your courage.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. amyjogoddard.com/questions if you want to hop on the phone. And we will hopefully talk to you soon, or we'll see you in another class or webinar sometime very soon.
Go forth in connection and power and boldness, upholding the erotic.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.